Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today, the top 10 types of communication that are closest to a universal language. Is it possible we will ever have a universal way for all humans to communicate? Imagine if you could talk to anyone on Earth in a way they would understand, and you could understand the answer. Some say that universal communication will come about through technology. Simultaneous translators are getting faster and better, but they still have a way to go. Plus, they'd have to conquer all 7,000 plus extant languages to be considered truly universal. So, could there be a language that might end up being a universal language? Well, today we're looking at 10 forms of communication that are the closest things that we have to universal communication between humans. Number 10. Facial expressions. You think you know what angry, sad, and happy look like on someone's face? Well, the chances are you actually really do. Humans express core emotions on their face as a primal form of communication. Moreover, these expressions seem to be ancient as they are shared across cultures. The great naturalist Charles Darwin recognized this. Indeed, he wrote his third book about this. He entitled it The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, and suggests that key emotions are even readable on animals themselves. If you've watched Great Apes, you can certainly see that they feel. Research shows that chimps laugh when tickled, even as babies, and can even sometimes smile. They can also read our facial expressions when we are displaying pleasure and disgust. While facial expressions for emotions might be universal, they do lack nuance. You might signal the world is falling apart and you're about to cry, but you probably can't tell someone is about to bake a cake or fix a car. Profound, yes. Practical, no. Number 9. Gestures. Gestures add to what you can do with your facial expressions. Anyone trying to communicate through a soundproof window, for example, might dip into this pool of information-giving instructions. It's easy enough to point to signal directions and suggest movements, up, down, left, right, or signal a target of interest, point at yourself, point at someone else, but gestures vary widely between cultures. Just look at the extensive body language gestures of the Japanese. To start with, to be polite, you never point. In Western cultures, eye contact is considered a cornerstone of polite conversation, but in Japan, it signals aggression. Number 8. Hobo signs. Nonverbal signals can also be written down. One set of intriguing symbols created by those traveling the American railroads, often looking for work, are hobo signs, or hobo code. Used from the 1880s until World War II, and especially widespread during the Depression, hobo signs could appear on any blank flat location, from walls to fences. You might leave a slanted T shape to warn others to get out fast, a tic-tac-toe symbol to mark the house of a policeman, or 5 circles to mean good chance to get money here. More complex shapes were able to convey more information to transients new to a town. This form of communication evolved in an altruistic fashion in order to help those who followed in your tracks. Naturally, the motivation to do so stemmed from hoping someone would give you a heads up before you arrived in the next place. Symbols have the advantage of being language independent. The disadvantage is that you must see them to use them as communication. Hobo signs also have the advantage that they do last a long time, especially if they are carved into stone. Number 7. Emoticons. Emoticons are the modern-day equivalent of hobo signs, but globally recognized. Again, they started with facial emotions, gestures were added later, think of the famous thumbs-up emoji, and went on to add a big chunk of our most common vocabulary rendered in the visual form. What started with a smiley face has exploded into pizza, coffee mug, even sailboat, pretty much anything it seems. Every type of leaf, flower, or tree is now included. Hearts proliferate, and there is a literal zoo of animals, including humans, pulling any number of poses. The vocabulary of this wordless language is so rich that a crowdsourcing project translated Moby Dick by Herman Melville into Emoji Dick. You can buy a copy of this today, and let's just say it's a good thing there is a whale emoji. Now, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but emojis are still strikingly simple. The linking of words to symbols can only go so far unless there starts to be consensus about the arbitrary linkages of words and pictures for complex concepts and things that are hard to cram into a tiny picture. Plus, you can't hear them, they work entirely visually, so emoticons are a fantastic aid to communication, but they fall short as a fully fledged form of human communication. Number 6. Sign language. In the 1500s, Benedictine monks were signing in order to sidestep vows of silence. One such monk went beyond the pale. Pedro Ponce de Leon is called the father of education for the deaf. He invented the first manual alphabet for fingerspelling. Perhaps the most famous fingerspeller in history is Helen Keller. Left blind and deaf after a childhood illness, she wrote and lectured extensively, championed disability rights, worked as an educator and humanitarian, and co-founded the ACLU. She was a hero to countless many and changed how the world saw people who were unable to see, hear, or speak. French Sign Language took off in the second half of the 1700s and led to the most widely used form of sign language, American Sign Language, or ASL. Marlee Matlin famously signed her way to an Academy Award in the movie Christian of a Lesser God. Today, someone who only speaks English and ASL and someone who speaks only Greek and ASL can speak fluently together. Sign language can be written in images that bring to mind hieroglyphics, and there have been several attempts to codify writing systems. There is even a request to create an ASL version of Wikipedia in signwriting. Still, the fingerspelling aspect of signing is language dependent. Moreover, there are more than 100 variants of sign language used worldwide, so not all of the signing systems are mutually intelligible. Number 5. Music. Music, like love, is often talked about as a universal language. Music can be used to express things that seem to go beyond words, and that is why we're including it in this video. Music can be used to express complex feelings and moods that are almost indescribable by simply using words. As such, it taps into the deepest territory of what it means to be a human. Music is more fundamentally a universal language of rhythm. Rhythm is something that all cultures share through dance or music, no matter what kind of music or music-making instruments they possess. Anyone can tap out a rhythm, even if it's just using their palm against any noise-making surface. Beyond rhythm, the brain responds to different combinations of notes in different ways. We can easily distinguish peaceful from frantic or happy from sad. Music has long been used as the backdrop for movies, as it heightens emotional responses and even signals the coming action. For example, you can play music to people from the Congo and the citizens of Montreal, and they will show the same emotional responses and physiological reactions to the music, even though their musical preferences vary considerably. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is famously quoted for writing, "Music is the universal language of all mankind." Science backs up this widely accepted notion of music's universality. Number 4. The Big Five languages. So, if we need a full spoken and written language as a candidate for a future universal language, we have some clear choices. While more than 7,000 languages are spoken on Earth today, most have restricted sets of speakers. Only 8 languages boast more than 100 million native speakers, and almost 4,000 have less than 10,000 speakers. And by the way, 692 of these languages have fewer than 100 speakers, and many languages are rapidly going extinct. For example, today 68 languages are still spoken in Mexico alone. The handful of mega languages that have taken over the globe are Chinese with 1.2 billion speakers, Spanish with 400 million speakers, English with 360 million speakers, Hindi with 350 million speakers, and Arabic with 250 million speakers. So in this entry, we don't want to ignore the fact that one of these might one day become dominant. Number 3. English. English stands out among the top 5 candidates for the first universal language for many reasons. First, it's relatively easy to learn. It uses the Latin script, so it's relatively easy to write, and it has long been the language associated with upward mobility. Plus, when you add in the number of non-native speakers to the top 5 languages, each of the numbers increase, but none as dramatically as English. The total number of English speakers in the world might be as high as 2 billion. This is driven by the fact that in many places, English is the language of business, the language of science and technology, as well as of entertainment, where English language cinema and pop music are exported globally. Still, English might be overtaken. The numbers suggest that according to population size, French is on the up, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Given how China has stepped up as a leader on the global stage, many parents of English-speaking kids are hiring nannies who can teach Chinese. While language teaching in the United States is declining, the number of Chinese classes is rising rapidly. Chinese influence is growing so fast that the next generation could well be looking east for the source of a global language. Number 2. Math. Now we jump to a language that is universal, that of nature. Maths describes the way the world works, and maths literacy is called numeracy. Numeracy is the same across all cultures. Pi is always the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter and is equal to 3.14 with infinite trailing digits. Using the language of maths, you can do everything from describing the rules of the natural world to calculating how to land a lunar module on the moon, or just count your money. While the fundamentals of maths, from addition to geometry to calculus, are uniform, the numbers are not. Numbers in the Western world are based on Arabic numerals, but if you look at the numbers 1 to 10, it shows just how different Arabic numbers are from our numbers today. Then we have Chinese, which uses pictograms, making them not mutually intelligible. Variables are codified, especially the universally recognized constants, but would still be described different in spoken words. E equals mc squared would be the most famous equation in history, and the letters stand for energy, mass, and the speed of light. But Einstein's original equation was written in German and was transitioned to English after he fled the Nazis and settled in America. Still, despite the power of maths, you can't use it to ask someone out. Number 1. Programming languages. What can describe all of maths and so much more, and be used to talk to computers and make them do any number of amazing computations? Computers, they make the world go round, from banking to the internet to looking for intelligent life, and it's all down to human-devised programming language. Actually, there are thousands of programming languages, but this is about the general concept. The speed of uptake means they are universal. They are written in the language of logic and maths, using symbols, and the majority take words from English. Programming languages originated in English-speaking countries or were devised by non-native speakers in English in order to promote their uptake. Programming languages have vocabulary and syntax, word order, just like real languages. Keywords, like print, define functions to do tasks, and symbols, like quotes and parentheses, help organize logic and actions, such as add, divide, or multiply. While a Java programmer might speak any native language, she will always type print to make a computer send a message to the screen. This code will be legible to all Java programmers. Still, there are non-English programming languages, and only a fraction of the world can read programming code, much less write it from scratch. And of course, programming code runs chatbots that mimic the human ability to communicate in language, but so far you can't use code to order a coffee. Maybe someday a group of programmers native in a range of human languages will write a universal translator software system and bring us all closer together. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please hit that like button below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also over there on the right, some other videos from the archives that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one. And as always, thank you for watching.